Let's talk a little bit about the draft coming up. Again, and let's talk. Let's talk. I am very skeptical. Skeptical. That's a word.
Yep.
That the NBA or that the Kings will make this pick, but hey, we got to go for it, man.
Yeah, and they got to do all their workouts and due diligence and see, hey, what are our best choices? Is it to take this player at 13, or is it to that's a good spot to be in a sense. You'd rather be playing in the playoffs, but if you miss out, they do have a pick and they get some choices here.
And I think, look, you got to do all the diligence that's due.
Yes,
obviously. We're looking at Tyler Smith today.
Yeah, we'll go through all the different potential guys at 13.
G League Unite, one of those guys. Yeah. One of those guys.
He's big, swing guy.
6'10",
6'11", I think.
There's a little audio for you.
At number 13, we have the Sacramento Kings. I have them taking the third Ignite player off the board, Tyler Smith. The more I watch of Smith, the more I feel like he'll make an appearance here in the late lottery. At 6'10", he's a true forward who really showed off his athleticism and shooting in the G. He shot 36% on 4 attempts from outside, overall scoring 13.4 points per game and getting it done in a lot of other areas too. Smith offers some immediate help in those areas for the Kings. I think he can help space the floor on a roster that really can't get enough spacing in its current configuration. And he also adds a little bit of size and athleticism that they've gone without for stretches at a time.
I think the key in all of that, so when I watched the clip that they showed, this is the dangerous part of not being as in tune to college basketball, or in this case, G League players. And then when you watch video, like, ooh, every time I watch them, I'm like, hey, I see some things there. But for him, to me, I think the phrasing that was said there, this piece was from SI, spacing.
Yeah.
As long as you're going Sabonis and Fox, which every reason to believe that's their anchor pieces going forward, you do need to space the floor for both of those guys. Sure. For Fox, for his ability to get into the lane and those paint touches and get all the way to the basket. And for Sabonis, just to create the space for him to see the floor and find people that he can get open with his great passing ability. So, again, that's kind of where Tyler Smith could fit in. He's big. He is athletic, 6'10".
Yeah.
Floor spacer, but I don't know if he is the ideal choice, but I think looking at him and seeing him in that general area, I've seen him as high as around 10 or 11 to 16, 17. He's a player in that area. So makes sense, some sense. I want to see more of these guys and overall what the Kings think, but yeah, I could see that.
Bill Duffy is his agent, also the same agent as Kessler Edwards. Could that be a connection? Ooh. 6'10", when you look at his pluses and minuses, if you will, the pluses, he can score. He can shoot the threes you talked about. He's a youngster, 19 years old.
Which that's a little abnormal for Monty.
That is incredible.
We say that, but
until it's not.
Right.
Until it's not. Negatives, his defensive rating. Doesn't get to the line too much. A little bit of fouls. He'll foul from time to time. Not the strongest rebounder, if you will, especially on the defensive end. But again, they've got to break stuff down there left and right. But he is, at least according to a couple mock drafts, the second ranked power forward in the draft behind possible number 1 pick Alex Sarr.
Yeah. So my own general thought on 13 is under the assumption that the Kings take the player and it's for them and they're keeping it. I think this player needs to be in the rotation immediately.
I agree with you.
So it's not, and it might be the 6th man, might be the 9th man, but someone that plays most every night where you're going, this player is a part of the 24-25 Sacramento Kings, as opposed to, well, in 2 years, I think they need more people that contribute right now.
I agree with you. Look, nobody's getting old on the team, at least core-wise, but
they're not getting younger either.
They're not getting younger.
Yeah, the window's still open.
Yes, and everyone's talking about the rise of Oklahoma City and Minnesota.
Sure.
And now you're going to have Memphis back in there likely next year. Houston, on and on. San Antonio. The West just gets better and better and better as the Lakers and Suns and Warriors kind of fall out. You're seeing this rise, and the Kings are weirdly, I think, considered in the middle. you've got, again, Minnesota, Oklahoma City. You've got these upper echelon young teams that are the future, and then you have these guys beneath Sacramento that seem to be coming up, and I don't think they want anybody else to pass them like Oklahoma City and Minnesota kind of had. So you do, which is, again, and I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, which is why I like, we're still going to do our NBA draft previews. We're still.
You think the better path though is to move it?
I would
move it for a proven thing that gets in that rotation.
Move it for a starter. Honestly,
okay.
I think you move it for a starter. Look, you got to fill the 2, and I say 3 or 4 depending on it. Look, I think if there's a Keegan's at the 3, but I could see him playing a little 4. And if there's a stud 3 out there that could work with them, I could see sliding him down or whatever. But odds are it's a 2 or a 4, and that highly depends on Malik Monk.
Yeah, and in general principle, moving it for a starter, do you think the 13th pick without a name attached to it, along with probably at least a current player, is enough to get a starter?
I think
whether that's Barnes, Herter, Mitchell.
I think that's what it would be. It would be Herter, it would be Barnes, it would be Mitchell, it would be a combo of them. I mean, Keon Ellis might get some. I know Kings fans hate that, but again, other GMs get paid.
Do they have other expirings next year? Like, that's the other beauty of.
You talking about the Kings?
Yeah, because sometimes that's the other chip is someone that's expiring, in the final year next year. I know this year they didn't really have expirings besides Malik. Yeah. They have some others, but.
When you look at Sacramento, I mean, most of their money is tied up for a while. As we know, Malik Monk is expiring. Keegan Murray will be on a team option, whatever. Trey Lyles isn't expiring next year. Sasha is on a team option. Davion, Chris Duarte are both qualifying offers.
So I think all those are potential candidates to be lumped in where team might also, like Washington might go, hey, look, I'll take on some salary, but I also don't want any long-term salary.
Also, by the way, Keon Ellis makes 2.1 next year and is on a team option for 2.3 the following year. That doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Because again, as we talked about it, we're dealing with the summer of distressed assets, and you're going to have a lot of those. It's not the value isn't just going to be the number 13 pick. The value is also going to be perhaps taking on an extended contract, taking on, when you look at a guy like Harrison Barnes, for example. Hey, look, Harrison Barnes has 2 more years left at 18 and 19.
It's not awful.
It's not awful, especially, and again, that's why like Washington makes so much sense as we kind of talked it through. We don't want to overvalue Harrison Barnes, but Harrison Barnes's leadership and culture building is much more needed on a team like the Wizards now than it is on the Kings, who've kind of gotten there.
Yeah, and that's a different leader than, for lack of a better term, Kuzma and Jordan.
Yes, much different.
Right now, those two guys have been on winning teams, but I mean, Barnes, year in and year out, has always been the grown-up on the team.
Instantly
no matter
comes
what
in
team he's been on.
As the guy everybody listens to in the locker room. I look at that Wizards roster. He walks right in, especially if you get about half that roster turned over, which it sounds like it's going to be. And you're looking at teams. You're looking at players on that roster. Let's just assume if they're doing a full rebuild, whether it's Kuzma or Avdia that's gone, I don't think they can move Jordan Poole. They probably want to move Marvin Bagley, but they can't. He'd reunite, perhaps. It's a player option. I expect he'll opt in with Rashawn Holmes. And then you've got Johnny Davis, Corey Kispert, Patrick Baldwin, Jared Butler. I mean, that roster sucks. I mean, it's horrible. So the Wizards have to be aggressive. So yes, I do believe the Kings number 13 packaged with either Herter, Barnes, and God knows what other piece. And oh, by the way, or if it, depending on the player and or a future first, which they can do. I mean, they could throw this year's 13 and they could throw a 20, 28, 29 first out there and be just fine, depending on who that is. I really do not expect them. I do not expect them to use that number 13 pick. And they might surprise me. I don't know it for a fact. It just, with their timeline, the way it lines up, and again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I already do. With all the smoke signals Monty sent us from day one about putting himself in a position and putting the team in a position where, when distressed assets, and he played the same playbook in Houston with Daryl Morey, this is that time.
Yeah, and it may line up with who we're going to be talking about next.
Coming up next, here's a guy that I would also very much like to see
Soda.
in a Sacramento King in the Soda. He fits right in as one of those distressed assets. We'll talk about it next.
Know what you might hear when listening to a Sacramento Kings